Welcome to the Pretty Intense podcast. Today on the show, I have Chervin Jafarieh. He has a podcast called Wake the Fake Up. He's been studying and diving into sort of the occult nature of things and esoteric thoughts since he was like 10. We are in a point in time on this planet where we have to wake up. And in the episode, you'll hear there's a timeline for this. The conversation had a lot to do with sovereignty and, our children and schools and disease and viruses and the food and our soil and just how do we get to a place where we know who we are and we are sovereign and that we are going to have a future on this planet for a long time to come in a really positive way instead of this destructive manner that really hasn't been going on that long. But if we don't course correct, big things are going to go the wrong way. And so Chervin is just a really wonderful man that is helping to inspire people. And I hope that you're inspired by this episode. So thanks for stopping by. Please hit the subscribe button and the bell for notifications. And let me know in the comments what you're doing to be more sovereign and to know who you are and to improve your life. I'm very curious, and I think everybody else would be too. Today's Pretty Intense partner is Athletic Greens. I take AG1 by Athletic Greens literally every day. I gave AG1 a try because I wanted to nourish my gut health. I wanted to have more energy. I wanted to add more micronutrients to my body. I take it first thing in the morning before I have coffee and then before I go work out. It makes me feel so good. I'm giving my body the nutrition it craves. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and get 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/prettyintense. That's drinkag1.com/prettyintense. Check it out. How is your world these days?
So good, actually. I've been in a really nice run over the last 30 days, deep diving and going back to a lot of my rituals, a lot of my old practices. And it's really calming the craziness that's all around me and everything that's going on with my company. And it's been great.
I mean, I didn't know that, vitamin D was a hormone until I started doing all this health stuff.
Yep. It's a hormone.
Yeah.
It's the body's reaction to any light source for the most part, mainly infrared and UVA and UVB light. It's part of a signal pathway. That's how it just shows you how insane light is, what light actually means in this world. It's a trip.
Well, it's everything.
It's everything.
I mean, it's like without light, everything dies. I would think, including us.
Yeah, well, nothing would be able to receive information without light. Light is actually, it's a message and it's transcribing so much information, right? We just see it as like something that illuminates something so our photoreceptors in our eyes can receive information, process it, and then create an image in the part of our brain. Like you see my face, I'm seeing your face. That's because we're, basically circulating within each other. But it's so much more.
Because we, of course, are going to get all into the edges of what's really going on. I totally have been thinking, I don't know if you have thought this at all, but there's so much blockage of the sun these days, it feels like. And like finally people are looking up and being like, oh, why does the sky look like a grid? And, it is completely confirmed through news and the government that they do spray chemicals in the air and that chemtrails are a real thing. Obviously, the last few years have been nuts, and there's been so many things to put us into a fear state and keep us indoors, avoiding the light. Actually, my friend just sent me a Instagram video that showed someone walking on the streets and somewhere in LA, and there's an advertisement for a building to live in. That's an underground building, like an
I saw that.
Building.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't need to go outside again. And I just feel like they are trying to now depress us and drive us crazy by blocking sunlight. And sure enough, it usually seems like whenever those chemtrails are up there, the next day is cloudy.
Absolutely. This is
going on. Research, tell us.
Yeah, I've been talking about this for 15 years. To the point where it's like it was falling on deaf ears for so long. And the whole thing where, no, those are contrails, when contrails last maximum 7 seconds in the atmosphere. And you can actually see that, they turn on and turn off and turn on and turn off, which ends that debate right there. This has been going on since the 40s. It's been, weather modification, weaponizing weather, and really understanding that this is a serious problem, which has basically evolved into this concept where we're now preserving the earth, because that's really how they're rolling it out, is that they're blocking UVA and UVB rays because of global warming. That's the whole story now. And that's the geoengineering story, is that what an awesome way of keeping the core of the earth cool and keeping the surface of the earth cool by spraying metallic atmospheric particulates, strontium, barium, aluminum into the sky cover, and have it reflect the sun back out into space. That's the story. It's such an abomination. It's so gnarly. This is an existential threat, in my opinion. This is something that you can't walk away from, because this stuff is making its way everywhere. It's microns size. So it's getting into people's lungs. It's getting into the soil. And like you said, father, son, I mean, that's our core energy source of every biochemical in nature and in our body, endogenous, and it's part of the production of the life cycle. We're dealing with some strange stuff. And the whole thing, did you see my post yesterday? I was talking about, this, we need the life force of the sun, but we also have to understand the sun. So it's not like you can't just be someone who wears sunblock for 20 years and then take a trip to Costa Rica and think that you can just go stand in front of the sun for 12 hours, right? There's a common sense approach. And this whole beauty industry about the sunlight is, damaging you and dangerous to you. Again, common sense approach. Sunlight gives you life. Sunlight activates 3,000 genes associated with longevity that we know of.
Wow.
It's the core essence of our circadian rhythm. So without sunlight on the rise, if you're not getting it into your eyes and getting it onto your body's immune system's not turning on, your clock isn't turning on. I can go on and on. Melatonin is produced from sunlight. And melatonin, we know, is not just the sleep, hormone. It's actually one of the strongest antioxidants in our system, even more than glutathione.
Why, when the sun goes down, why is there a melatonin surge, right? Because it's when the sun goes down that the surge of melatonin comes.
That's correct. Yeah. So it's building that reservoir on the rise. So the rising sun builds the reservoir of melatonin, and then the body responds by releasing that melatonin throughout the brain and body and intracellularly as the sun makes its declination to the east. So as the sun moves away from us, and as long as we're not, shrouded in, I would say pollutionary light, blue light, spectrums like that, melatonin expands and releases throughout the body and serves as a major antioxidant. And it's actually creating redox in the body, where it's lending electrons to free radicals throughout the body from brain to toe. Very interesting. And that's why, I'm sure you've been in a campfire, or, fire is everything, right? So fire is very similar with the sun's rays to a certain extent. It's offering certain nanometers of light waves and infrared, which is soothing to the system. And it's actually releasing stress and cortisol throughout the body. That's why you sit in front of a fire for an hour in a camp, you're ready to go to sleep. Usually you have the best sleep ever.
Yeah. Or if you have the ability to get a red light, they recommend doing red light, sunrise, sunset to mimic. Because really, red light is just pulling a little narrow spectrum of what the sun offers, right? To help with the circadian rhythm and help with sort of waking up and going to sleep and because it's about the rhythm, right?
That's right. Yep. And I do red light every other day on the rise, and almost every evening, around 7:30, 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
And it's part of the ritual, and it's got so many benefits on just everything. I mean, it's all common sense with your health. It's not like we can isolate or looking at it allopathically. It's like red light raises ATP, or red light lowers cytochrome B, or whatever it is. We get sometimes so allopathic that we don't realize that by it doing one thing means it's doing so many other things. and it's got an evolutionary aspect to it that's part of our entire doctrine and our physiology of being human. And that's where the spirit comes into play. So we get out of the left brain analytical biohacking energy, and we start looking at these things as evolutionary, and understanding that the human body was designed with a set of instructions. We're earth made. You and I are filled with minerals of the earth. Like, how trippy is that? Body is actually made of what we walk on, right? And we don't even know what's under us. It's such a trip.
No.
That's why we have to ground to the earth. That's why we drink spring water. That's why we mineralize our body.
Oh, I think I saw you say something about being careful how much of that you put in your water for hydration. Is that true?
How much of what specifically?
Minerals and salt, or sodium, potassium, chlorine, all the different minerals and whatnot. Is that dangerous, or is it good to put it in your water all the time?
I think it depends. Like, some person's medicine is another person's poison. We have to really approach things pragmatically with who we are, where we are, why we are, how we live our lives, things of that nature. And so mineralization is foundation to health. Getting electrolytes, getting sea salt in your body, especially on the rise, especially around your vigorous workouts, is critical. But you can overdo it, of course. And then there's wrong form minerals, things that are made, industrial, byproducts that have no basis of being in our body, and actually create damage and hardening of the body. That's when you get fibrotic tissue and overcalcification of the body and things of that nature. And so our body I came with a set of instruction. We have cycles in our life. My body's different than when I was 14. Right. And so it requires different things at different stages. There's a 24-hour cycle, there's a 7-day cycle, and there's a 28-day cycle, and a 7-year cycle in the way that we need to approach our health. And this is traditional Chinese herbal medicine. This is an Ayurvedic approach, but they all correlate with new formed understanding of how our immune system works, how stem cells work in the body, all these different things. All kind of meet together at some summit. And so there's a lot of cool stuff here. This is what I love to do.
I'm glad you mentioned stem cells. I was curious. I wasn't sure we'd get to it or not. But so you were talking about these cycles. Is there something appropriate for each cycle, like the 1 day, the 1 week, the 28 days, and the 7 years? Is there in those cycles? Is it like, hey, every day you should be doing this, and every week you should make sure you include this? Or is it more of a cascade that when you do each day right, it leads into the next 7 years? You'll be a different body, because every 7 years we have a whole new body. Is that correct?
That's right. And we go through a shift every 7 years in the multiple complex systems in the body, whether it's our neuro system, our cardio system, our digestive system, all of those things, they shift a little bit. Things change, hormones change, thyroid changes, the way that we receive information changes, our oral health changes. All those things start to make a different shift. And so you're right. How you do anything is how you do everything. So every day, you're creating an opportunity to not only feel healthy, but to thrive and to get better and better. I do think that there are systems, depending on people's constitution, that would lead us into stronger health and lead us into more of a resilient health. You hear a lot of the geneticists today talking about how we have a health span and we have a disease span. And once you leave the health span, you enter the disease span. And getting back to the health span, once you're in the disease state, is a lot more difficult than keeping a life filled in the health state. And we're in interesting times. It is what's happened over the last 100 years to our atmosphere, like we just talked about, to our water, to our soil, to our food, to our education, to the fear, to the scarcity. All of these things are destructionary forces that are the opposite of syntropy, which is a place of symbiotic evolution, where everything is coming together to create a utopic paradise. And we're in such fight, flight, rage, hide energy with scarcity. Then you have all the physiological aspects that are falling apart. We're not getting sunlight. We're living in industrial warehouses. We're living in artificial boxes. We're controlling the temperature and the lighting, not pulled away from nature. That right there in itself doesn't allow us to pull on to our hormetic codes. And what do I mean by that? Hormesis, that which does not kill you makes you stronger. And so we're no longer hunting for our spring water and growing our own food and putting in all this effort for the sustainable things that we need to survive. And so that's not activating, well, they call it now sirtuin pathways, longevity pathways. So we're just, we're sedentary more than ever. We're sitting on the couch, we're laying in our bed, we're sitting in a car, we're doing all these things. These things are keeping us from pulling on the strings of being active and pulling on the strings of surviving.
Like, what is our trajectory with that kind of accumulation of issues and of reduction of humanism almost?
Yeah, well, you're seeing it right now unfold all around us. I mean, we're at crisis level with cardiovascular diseases and cardiovascular events, which is a byproduct of metabolic diseases for the most part, and inflammatory diseases. I'm not even talking about cancers and lymphomas and all those things. We've never been at this level of obesity, and that right there skyrockets into being overridden by pathogens and toxins and parasites and infections and Lyme, where otherwise our immune system is able to handle all of these. And then you have the sexually transmitted diseases that are running haywire. And then now we have neurodegenerative diseases that I'm watching these stats and I'm like, I've never seen this level of dementia and Parkinson's. And these are just names that someone gave them. What are we talking about right now? We're talking about the effect of neurology of the brain is not wiring correctly, and it's hardening and it's filled with toxins, and it can't release itself through its lymphatic system, which is the lymph node of the brain. You throw that in, and now we're not sleeping properly. It's haywire. Now, I don't want this to be doom and gloom like our atmosphere over but I think by understanding what's going on and not putting your head in the sand and saying namaste, it gives us the opportunity to look at ourselves and figuring out, hey, do I want to keep playing this game, or is my karma going to change based on something that I'm doing with my free will? And that's all I talk about. I mean, if you listen to any of my content and everything I'm doing out there, I'm not trying to catch the viral wave of social media or get involved in all that escapism bullshit. I'm not playing into that part. And the same thing I've noticed with you is that you're standing in your truth and you're talking about things that matter, and you're not just trying to like catch on the next trend. I'm so against I almost think it's more destructive to be talking about regurgitated drivel to get more people that just want to escape to your content, right? Versus talking about things that matter. And those
things feel reactive, where when you're in your truth and you're following sort of intuition and curiosities, then it feels like you're more on the leading edge, as opposed to just kind of following the masses and what is clickbaity and what is a hot topic. It's like, that will never evolve because it's reactionary. So for me, this podcast is totally my curiosities. It is like my guilty pleasure. And I also love meeting people, and just my network has become so wide and interesting. And so yeah, I think you're right. And I give you props for, being able to stay in that truth. I mean, Cymbiotika, how long has Cymbiotika been around? And was there something before Cymbiotika? Because I've been taking your products for a long time. But was there something before that?
Before I answer that, I just wanted to say I receive all that with such clarity, and that resonates so much, that the purpose behind this is the curiosity. It's the investigator. And that's part of my human design. That's in my gene keys. I've had that since day one, being born into this body, in this realm, whatever this is. It's curiosity and wanting to know more. And so I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, I have a curious question.
Sure.
Do you find that when you are in that space, which you are obviously most of the time, do you find that you actually end up asking all the right questions that are extremely pertinent, or like that end up like weaving into this whole like, wow, I can't believe I asked about that, and then you were wearing that, and then you told me the story about that, and then all of a sudden, and it feels almost like your information is far more divine and higher self than it is actually intellectualized. It's actually channeled in a way. Do you find that?
100%. We've gotten too far off into the intellectualism, which is which has created too much of a heady space where free thought and divine connection and all the things that are buried within our DNA is not able to surface because of that left brain analytical lockdown. And that's part of the matrix that we're in right now. That's part of the school systems that we're in. We're bred to be indoctrinated with information for recall as opposed to activation philosophy. And I think there's a place for both meeting together in an intersection. I think you can't have one without the other. And that's part of my pedigree as an anthroposophist and growing up with Rudolf Steiner teachings. And part of my entire makeup in my embodiment is finding that balance between knowledge-based information and also the ability to access higher attainment from your soul. I mean, if you think about it, you are the cosmic goo of all your ancestors, and everyone's always talking about past lives and all these different things. And there isn't specific ways of legitimizing it. It's an overall network of understanding that we come from a source, and we are carrying on so much genetic information that we can't even comprehend. And if that's the case, if each part of those genes are carrying that kind of information, it's no wonder why we're feeling such a connection to our ancestors.
Yeah.
And why there's so much information out there that's coming to us. So I agree with you, and I do feel that there are moments where it's time to get analytical, and it's time to look at the data, and it's time to be an intellectual. But then there's times to remove all that information and to go into a complete wide open channel and open up the heart and open up the connection to source. And usually I do that with all the other things off and going into that quiet space. And that's why we do Vipassanas. That's why we spend 2-3 months in the jungles with shamans. That's why we go through these initiations. Yeah. It's been a wild life, where I've come from and what I've gone through to get here. I didn't just wake up one day and all of a sudden, these things were happening around me. This was a life that the opportunities came to me and I accepted them. And back to your question about Cymbiotika, I'm the firstborn son of a pretty cool Persian family that goes back 5,000-6,000 years. And I was the firstborn son out of that entire lineage that was born here in North America. My dad immigrated from Iran. And that's kind of a trip when I realized that at age of like 5 or 6, growing up in La Jolla, California. I was like, wait a second, I'm not from here. All my grandpas, for the last 5,000-6,000 years, maybe longer, grew up in one area of northern Iran. And I'm the firstborn son out of that entire lineage. If you look at an entire chart,
that's crazy.
It's crazy. And I remember feeling into that at such an early age, like, what the hell? I'm speaking English.
Wow. Was your family also Zoroastrian in religion or spiritual practices, which is, I believe, to be the oldest religion that we know of, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, you know that. Yeah, my family, that's right. And that's the ancient, faith-based system. It was the first Christ system where you had a Christ, Ahura Mazda, and then you had the Antichrist, Ahriman, which was the devil. And it's interesting that was 5,000 years before Christ, 4,500 years before Christ, and that was the I would say the impetus to want to reach more into my background and understand my culture. And I felt at an early age that this life mattered. I was old soul at
Mm.
6 and 7. And then because of that, I don't know, it just called in all these mentors. And at age 9, David Wolf, my
Wow.
cousin, who was creating the raw food movement at that time.
Wow.
I was literally a child while this guy was becoming the most famous raw foodist in the world.
Hmm.
And this is my mom's sister's son, and he's half Persian. And what were the chances that I was involved in that entire journey? And he introduced me to David Icke when I was 10.
No way.
I read The Truth Shall Set You Free, and then Children of the Matrix at 10.
Wow.
I
Oh my
wasn't
God. Like, how did you even, could you really comprehend? Because I also believe that it's, I try and talk to people and watch things and read things that are beyond me because I know it'll help me learn. But I mean, at 10, you don't even have the ability to have that kind of discernment with the information you're taking in. So to be reading and taking in that information at 10, you had to have been like not an old soul, an ancient soul.
Danica, I felt that. I really felt there was a purpose in my life at such an early age, and that there was something so divine going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also angry too. There was a level of anger at that age because I was learning about, the US foreign policy and what happened with Iran and how the implosions of wars happened. And I was learning about all these different things, about, a lot of the agencies that were involved. And so my mind was in that level. It's like conspiracy theory today's, but these are things I was learning at age 10 and 11 in 1993. And then when you start piecing together all the medical system, and so health was a big part of my upbringing, is that nutrition, standard American diet, what they were feeding kids was so insane. And think about
So it was just an awareness to that. It wasn't like there was someone sick, or because a lot of times when someone has such a passion and then a knowledge about something, it's because it's necessary, and usually we need it for something. So it was purely just part of the puzzle for you, is to this is something that isn't right and you need to understand it.
At first it was, before even someone got sick. My mom actually was diagnosed with breast cancer. I was 14 and I was already, head deep in all this stuff. And we were able to get through that fairly quickly, through fasting and raw foods and enzymes and nutrition and
With chemo?
No chemo.
No chemo.
No chemo, minor surgery, and was able to get through that very quickly. But we were just on the heels of the 80s, which was complete treachery in this world. I mean, that was, if most people don't know, I mean, I was a kid for that. I don't really remember much in terms of what was happening around me at that time. I was just 6, 7 years old. But the 80s was like the time where, you had the material woman, and what I mean by that is it was all hyper materialism. You had the Woodstock era, you had the LSD, psilocybin, psychedelic realm, hippie revolution, the consciousness explosion. And then the government's like, nope.
Whoa, that's too cool for school. We got to get you a little dumber.
we got to shut down all of your frequencies. We can't have people dissolving egos and loving each other and coming together in harmony. We need to complete our imperialism. We had all our wars. I mean, Vietnam was going on, but there was Cold Wars everywhere and all this stuff happening. So they immediately turned all those psychedelics into Schedule I drugs, and then opened up the floodgates of alcohol, and then ultimately opened up the floodgates of cocaine. And so all that happened in the mid 70s, late 70s. And then you had this complete revolution or de-evolution of the mind. And in the 80s, it was Wall Street, materialism, radical corporations like a chicken with their heads cut off, destroying everything in sight in nature, no oversight whatsoever, and monopolies and corruption and all this stuff. The 80s was a disaster to our Mother Earth, was a disaster to our gnosis and our psychology. And it's also why after the 80s, the way that it just led into more craziness with our medical system and the way that we were birthing children and the immunization calendars. I mean, it was insanity. I think God,
exploding then. Yeah.
Thank God I missed all that and didn't have it, wasn't I wasn't part of all that, but it's devastating. So I'm just making a point on how these things have been phasing, because it's important to know our history. It's important to know our empirical history. We're so in denial, and we're so out of our own conscious body today because of all
that wasn't that long ago. It wasn't that long ago.
The other day. And that's what's going to happen in the next 15, 20 years. And just think about it. And it led towards such craziness. And it makes
it seem likely then that the powers that really are in control would be promoting non-humanism, because it's a lot easier to not be human when all this shit's going on.
Exactly. That's exactly right, Danica. You hit it right on the nail. And that's interesting because Rudolf Steiner is one of my guiding lights, and he's like a father to me in so many ways.
What was his, I've heard him before. I also follow the work of a guy named Robert Gilbert, and I feel like Robert Gilbert, have you ever heard of him?
No.
He does like a lot of different things when it comes to frequency, frequency and energy. And he's sort of like has some sort of ancient Egyptian teachings that he was able to bring over here, and biogeometry and all kinds of different things. So anyway, he talks about Rudolf Steiner as well. So I'm curious, what is he all about? What did he do?
He did a lot, and I'm a big fan of biogeometry.
Yeah,
I have biogeometry throughout my home and all.
Yeah, I feel like I need to renovate an entire, I need to start a house from scratch with like appropriate ley lines, like crystal grids, like the house being the right shape and design and orientation.
Our living environment is real. That's a part of being human. And, we're not supposed to have, 90-degree walls and all these things. It just energetically cuts us off. But not to go off into that tangent.
That's a fun one. That's a different one.
We can definitely create an own podcast around that. I spent a lot of time in that conversation, and I love architecture, and that's a whole thing. Rudolf Steiner is a sage. He is a guiding light to our world. He's a clairvoyant scientist, occultist, master genius, and just gave his entire life to the world and investigated everything out there for, that you can imagine, from Aristotle and Plato to the ancient Vedics, to the Persian Empire, to all of that.
Wow.
And he was an Austrian-born wizard with that kind of clairvoyance. He created biodynamic farming and Waldorf education. And you're familiar with Waldorf?
Yeah.
It's all through the governance of Steiner's work. And most importantly to me is he channeled a cosmology of where we are today in this realm. And that cosmology is our connection to, our sky clock, our connection to the earth, and our consciousness with it. And his whole thing is that we live in a trinity. It's non-dualistic. And what he meant by that.
What?
Yeah, so it's a non-duality. It's not good versus evil. It's not even looking at things with that kind of lens. As soon as we start looking at that lens, we lose sight of our guiding light and who we are and where we are. And so he coined it very interesting. This is very powerful. He channeled that there is a Luciferic energy in this world. And Lucifer is the bearer of light. Most people who hear of Lucifer, they think of a slithering demon coming to get you from underground and pull you into hell. That's not what Lucifer is. Lucifer is the bearer of light. It's the temptation. It's the ego. It's correlated with our blood in the body. It's the fire. It's the hyper spiritual. It's the super hyper religious. It's being completely disconnected from your earth body and connected to the fundamentals of what earth is.
How'd it get so twisted? Because we have to have something to hate, divide and conquer.
Possibly. It's being so outside of your body and your thought that it's becoming irrational. It's too spiritual to comprehend. That's and you are the savior mentality. You've seen it with a lot of stories of people saying, I'm the divine, messenger, I am this, I am that, and creating followers and wanting to be revered as the guiding light. That's a Luciferic tendency, and that's a Luciferic compulsion.
Oh, wow.
And then on the polar opposite is the Ahrimanic energy, which comes from Ahriman, which is the deity from Zoroastrianism that Steiner brought in that for his cosmology, which is the deity of materialism, that you are only flesh and bone, that there's no such thing as soul in your body, that you are earthbound. And Ahriman expresses itself through government, science, materialism, all the things that are shrouded in artificial intelligence, computer statistics, all the things that we are today. And so today is the age of Ahriman. The last 2,000 years, 2,500 years was a very Luciferic realm. You can see it in all the stories. You could see it in the way that the scriptures work and all these things. Is hyper spirituality. Over the last 400 or 500 years, the Ahrimanic energy has made its way into our earth plane. And Steiner 100 years ago said, 100 years from now, we are going to be in the core impulse of Ahriman, and we'll have 20 years to snap out of it. If we don't snap out of it in the next 20 years, that's from 2020 to 2040, we're going to enter something called the eighth sphere. And the eighth sphere is something like the movie WALL-E, or it's a dystopic world where we've completely forgotten what we've forgotten. We have no more connection to our soul. We have no more connection to our ancestors. We've become
like completely though, because right now we're like remembering, and we're like, man, why are we as Graham Hancock would say, why are we a race of amnesia?
That's right.
And the fact that we have awareness that we have amnesia means there's still something there. But you're saying that if we don't make this transition by 2040, that we won't even know that there was a past. We won't be aware of amnesia.
That's absolutely correct. We're forgetting it through generations, and we're at generation lost right now, and it's getting worse. And the advent of artificial intelligence, technology, data capture, which is pulling the child out of the present and is not allowing the child to develop internal faculties of being in nature, being connected to spirit, which again goes back to biodynamic farming and Waldorf education and all these principles of developing internal faculties based on the true life, as opposed to this fake radiation controlled devices and the system. We're in desperate times, and it's getting dangerous. And the Christ impulse, the Christ conscious, is the balance between materialism and
so that's the third. The Christ consciousness is the third.
It's right in the middle. And
the middle way. Well, the middle way.
It's the middle way. And Christ is embodying that we are earth bodies, that we have these flesh suits, but also knowing that there's a deep spiritual embodiment. And we have to understand these tendencies. We got to understand Ahriman. We got to understand Lucifer, and not look at them as demons or being scared of them or any of these things. We have to study them. It's the lack of looking at it and understanding it that creates the problem. And that's what these two entities want. They want you to not know that they are there.
Yeah. I mean, I let's get into something tangible. How do you, with that awareness of this sort of trinity of dynamic, which trinities are something that you hear about over and over and over again. And as we're talking about Zoroastrian and that certain prophecy, certain things where there was a religion and Christ-like consciousness practice thousands of years before Christ. I mean, it makes me think of the movie Zeitgeist and how, that for the first time, that was where I saw it, where I was like, oh, wow, this is a pattern that has reoccurred over and over and over again in history with a Christ-like figure. Certain names, dates, all the things line up in a cyclical sort of fashion. So what do we do with this awareness of this trinity? How does this actually help our life?
Yeah. So the Zeitgeist, they show you the Egyptian perspective, of Thoth, and show you that that's very similar with the Christ story. And then you look at Zoroastrianism, it's exactly identical with the Christ story, with the 12 people and the disciples, all the numbers are matching up. And so for me, it's all coding. There's some kind of coding going on. And
This is why you love Robert Edward Grant, isn't it?
yeah. This is why me and him could talk for days straight.
Totally.
And so we have to take heed to this. And if this is something that interests you, then you go deeper and you start looking at your life. Well, I highly advise everyone to understand this Trinity, but also look at yourself, look at your life. Do a forensic audit on your experience every day. And so Rudolf Steiner was a Rosicrucian. And
love that.
So I practiced Rosicrucianism, practicing it for 15 years.
Oh, cool. This is another Robert Gilbert thing. He big and
okay, now I know who Robert Gilbert is.
Yeah, he's a great, strong, clear
he's a character. I like him. I like him a lot. I think he's done videos on Rosicrucianism, right?
Yes.
Okay,
correct.
And so he along with others and myself, you do an audit on your reality. That's how that's a spiritual science. Why are we not investigating ourselves and our consciousness and our behavioral patterns? You ask anyone that wants to upgrade their life, whether it's a life coach or whatever it is you have to investigate your patterns. You have to investigate your day. And it starts by investigating your day. And so before I go to bed, I do an audit on my day. I replay all my interactions to the best of my ability. And once you get started doing this after a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you get better. And you're actually creating neuroplasticity, because you're not just like letting things go. And this isn't something where you sit there and you're dwelling on your day or you're dwelling on your life. In fact, it's the opposite, because how are you supposed to grow and get better if you're not analyzing your reactions to things and what caused you to escape and what caused you to tense up and what things drew you in, what things drew you out? These are all things that are pattern interruptions in our daily lives, that if we're not cognizant of them, we're doing the same thing over and over and over, and we're not getting anywhere. And so a deep initiate or a Rosicrucian or an anthroposophist or a theosophist, whatever you want to call it, does these evaluations. And usually they do them before bed. And there's a whole cycle to that. And I always tell people, look at your life and look at your life through the lens of the Trinity. Where are you getting too caught up in the head? Where are you too caught up into your materialism? Where are you identifying yourself with your materialism? And when I say materialism, I don't just mean your fancy homes and cars and money and all that stuff. I'm talking about deeper. Where do you identify with yourself as your name, as your body, right? And if you could start getting out of this thing that you are this body, that's part of my meditation. I go, this isn't me. My name is Chervin, but I'm just inhabiting this body. This is a rental. And when you start getting into that level of samadhi, it's almost like the practice of dying before dying. It unlocks things in you of freedom you can't even comprehend. And this is a core practice of the philosophy of freedom, is being able to open up the clutches of the materialism that this is who you are, your name, your body, all of these things. And it creates a lot of freedom. And then on the other side of it is, where are you running away from your body? Where are you neglecting your body? How are you not taking care of your body? Are you too caught up in fantasy? Are you daydreaming too much? Are you too much in a victim role? Do you feel like you're drifting into poverty conscious too much? Those are all like luciferic by nature, because they're taking you out of your identification. And when you can merge those worlds and get into a state where you're finding balance between them, that's really when you're activating that Christ within you and what Christ represents. And that's a beautiful sequence to have.
All of this feels like it's leading towards sovereignty, which is, I know, something that you were curious about talking about. And I was like, yes. I mean, I have a good girlfriend who her whole spiritual teaching is based on sovereignty. And I totally believe that we're being called inward because everything's been so out, and that we don't have any idea what to even trust anymore. So we're the only real system that is actually an incredible lie detector system is us. And so how do we develop more sovereignty? How do we even get to know ourselves in the landscape of the way everything looks these days? Is this like start the commune, start over? Or how do we get to that place where we really know ourselves and can become sovereign?
That's the greatest question on earth today, and probably the most important and critical for our time, because how many people on this earth today are living in their soul's purpose, what they've incarnated here to do? And when you look at that, it's like, a decimal probably. And so if you have a
You
whole
said
realm,
Rudolf Steiner was saying that only a third would be, right? Like a third. I think I heard something where he's like a third will be confused, a third will be a third will be in their dharma, and another third will be soulless.
that's right. And we can see that today.
Mm-hmm.
And even the people that are going to be in their dharma, they're still going to be caught up in the hyper materialism of this world, and the debt slave society and all the stuff that's happening, that's so intrusive on our soul's journey and taking us out of our element. And so obviously there needs to be some kind of dismantling of the systems.
Right.
It's not a
Yeah.
shift. It can't shift anymore. It's like a revolution has to
Start over. Just don't fix what's broken. Just start over.
Start over. That's going to have to happen. In order for that to happen, though, we need people stepping into their sovereignty and their freedom and saying enough's enough. I think we've seen it over the last 3-4 years, especially with the abomination we just went through that I rarely talk about publicly. And it's waking a lot of people up. You push people too far, it gets to the point where you've almost over-indexed what you were trying to push people to do, and now you're seeing people snapping out of their bullshit, waking up, and mothers are waking up too, which is the most, that right there is the most
for their children.
For their children. You
saw that with the vaccine. You really did. You saw that with the vaccine. You're like, okay, well, you got to make me do it, but whoa, wait. Now you're making my kids do it. And that's when you really, because they push too far.
You can't push a mother. And that was a fatal mistake. And I think that was the turning of the tide. And I'm feeling into that, because so many mothers are contacting me on a daily basis for years. Right. And it's just really beautiful to see people stepping into their power and really caring about what is happening around them and how their kids are being taught at school, and starting homeschool systems and Waldorf education. I've actually been asked to create a whole new Waldorf paradigm in the Middle East. I'm really excited about being part of that journey. Cool. Yeah, really, really powerful stuff that's happening. And I'm just really,
Does Waldorf exist in the Middle East, or is there nothing like it?
There's really nothing like it. There's bits and pieces here and there, but it's something that now there's a renaissance happening in the Middle East, right? And people are snapping out of the illusion. And America is just kind of falling apart in so many ways. I hate to say it. I'm American. I love my country. I'm from California, and it's just what's happened and what's happening right now is so insane. The cancel culture is so insane. And again, these are things that I have to be careful about what I say, just because of Cymbiotika. But most people know where I stand, and I stand in sovereignty. So back to your question, how do we become sovereign? Well, the body has to be sovereign first and foremost. So
that seems so impossible right now.
Well, we got to get back to the fundamentals. And I'm all about exotic health plans, detoxification, the best nutrition on earth, the best supplements on earth, all of these things. Those are all fantastic and necessary, but you can't go into those things if the fundamentals aren't in place. And so if people aren't moving their body, if people aren't, connected to the sun, if people aren't earthing their body onto the earth, if people aren't hydrated properly, if people aren't working on their breath, getting oxygen in their body, forget about it. Don't even think about becoming sovereign, because your body's not even in a position to expand. And these things are crippling our entire known realm. And it's not a fad. to be in your earth body, connected to your spirit, connected to nature. That's just where we belong. We got to get out of these metropolitan cities. If you're living on the 40th floor, getting 20 minutes of sunlight every day, drinking your latte and eating till 10 p.m. at night every night, and washing it down with TV and news and all that stuff,
alcohol.
Yeah, you're just, that's a whole nother level. You're heading towards a cliff with no brakes. And it's tough to see that. But I've also sat back and said, this is just part of the unfolding. We can't convince anyone. We all just have to embody. And so your daily practices and how you do anything is how you do everything. And so being conscious with your decision making and really making the choices that are going to put you in a position to thrive. This survival energy is not getting us anywhere. Everybody's body has the ability to heal. Everybody's bodies has the ability to expand. And we all have the potential to hit peak genius. It's there, but it's the system and the decision making is basically, I think, creates such a frail environment from within.
It's reminding me, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. We just talked about this like 2 days ago, with Robert, but the new earth and how it just feels like, actually, honestly, chemtrails is one of them that I think to myself, I can control, like I can grow my own food. I can, find a water source. There's so many things that you go, I can kind of do that, but I can't do anything about what covers the entire planet in the sky. Like I can't do anything about that. So I think to myself about like, how do we get out of this mess? And, the new earth thing keeps coming to mind. And while I know that you're very much in, like the field of, health through supplementation, and especially what the soil isn't giving us anymore and what the sun is barely giving us with all the things going on and various different things. But, what is your awareness about that? Because I've asked so many people about the new earth because it just seems like something my mind has a hard time comprehending, although it's been something that many have spoken about for a long time. And when we were having this text conversation about like, hey, I'm going to interview you in a couple of days, any hot topic you want to hit. And it was at like, 1:44 p.m. and at 1:44 p.m. I had asked about the new earth, and I think Robert was like, well, 144,000 people are going to be transitioning to the new earth. So I continue to get little bits of information, but it almost feels like there has to be a dimensional shift, or like there'll just be a reality shift. And it might not be something that any of us even know about that get to move forward or that don't move forward. We won't know we're in it or not in it. It'll just be a new realm of reality. So what have you found out about the new earth concept?
Well, I'm a pragmatist, and I'm an optimist.
Yeah.
But I'm also a realist. And the new earth concept, I'm here for that. That's why I do what I do. And that's why I live with the intention. And that's why my life's work is to offer guidance, not through indoctrination, but through embodiment, and be a living example. As far as the 144,000 or the new genetic sequence that's going to take in on the new children, there's a lot of ideas and there's a lot of concepts around these things. Some of them are extreme, some of them are radical, but I'm also a believer that this world is not what we think it is. And there's so much to it that is, it's so spiritual that we couldn't even comprehend it. So there's a level of irrationality that needs to happen. Like when you think about our world and how these systems work, it's irrational to a certain extent. And so there's a beauty to that, is like trusting and believing in something that doesn't have to be weighed or measured. And some scientist tells you that this is what it is. And I think that we are heading into a direction where something has to give. It can't keep going at this velocity in this direction. And through that, and through every fire, through every quake, through every whatever, something new is born from that. we have to kind of go through some level of pain and suffering. And that's the cosmic law. That's part of the cosmic law. So I feel like we have to put ourselves in position to be able to move through all this. And it's not in a place of fear. It's in a place of trust. And you talk about things that we can control and things that we can't control. And so you mentioned atmospheric spraying and things of that nature. Like, how do we control that? Well, the first way that we control that is we're aware of it. Number one. Number two, we don't let it keep triggering anger and fear and resentment. So we're not getting caught up in that biochemical wave every single time we experience it. And we have these conversations with our loved ones and we communicate about it. So it's starting to spread and people are talking about it more. You and I are talking about it just on a small fractional level, but there's probably millions of people that are talking about it out there, but there's also billions of people that don't even look up, right? So at some point, this has to be communicated to a large scale. We also have to know what's happening with these things. How do we detoxify our body? How do we keep our body in a state of health while we're going through this? And these are things that, again, planning to fail or failing to plan is planning to fail. We have to have these conversations. We have to have these meetings. We have to have these gatherings. I think we're so isolated in this world, in our realm, and social media is creating an illusion that there's connection. When in actuality, there is zero connection.
Well, and I mean, you say that there's no duality, but it sure feels like there's so much duality in a sense that like we are more connected than ever, but we are actually less connected to each other than ever from a physical, emotional standpoint, from an energetic standpoint.
That's correct. You hit it right on the nail. We are not creating momentum directly through connection.
Right.
There's sparks of it and there's these things, but it's not going anywhere.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's and it's just a form of, I don't know, intellectualism, or it's just like you're creating a dopamine release, but nothing is being followed through. There's no physical action, there's no movement. We're not becoming stewards of anything. We're just sitting there and we're feeling good. Even people that are into these types of conversations and things like that, we're feeling good. We're okay. There's other people talking about it,
yeah,
but
nothing changes.
Nothing changes. And then at some point, when you start doing that for 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years, 15 years, you're just getting caught into the mental masturbation of it.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. And I'm sure the systems and the things that are running the system know that. We're dealing with IQs high 100s, in the 180s, 190s, that know what they're doing in terms of data and all of these things. This isn't just random. None of this is random.
What do you think is happening at that macro level? What is that macro level manipulation? I mean, there's always lots of theories about the Illuminati or cabal or various different
deep state and all those things.
Deep state, yeah. What's going on?
I think there's many names to it. So I don't think getting into what we call it means much. There is an energy that wants control, that wants, unlimited power. And that energy, that technocratic energy, has mastered its next evolution into technology. You could see it from the Age of Dawn and how it manipulated different groups and systems, from Freemasonry to Knights of Templar to all these things. You understand it's like a virus or a parasite. It taps into where it can use its power and flex its power and infect things. And technology was the perfect weapon. It was the perfect weapon because once you understand human psychology and what makes us thrive, what makes us tick, what keeps us in a state of fear, what keeps us alive but not able to grow, then you can really manipulate the world. And the advent of social media was supposed to be the opposite of mainstream television. but it's actually become, even a crazier weapon. And then you have handheld devices and all these things, and now you have, virtual reality and video games and all this crap. This stuff is doing a number to us. And so what is their end game? I don't think there's an end game. I think it's a constant game. I don't think it's anything that turns into something else. It just evolves into where the world is taking it. And it's rooted in greed. It's rooted in fear. It's rooted in indoctrination. And it's telling a fictitious story. That's where and it's a disease in some form.
So you don't think it's necessarily a person, a group, a round table of people. It's more of a pattern within us. Like, I mean, I think a lot about a lot of things being fractal, and how while there's some sort of overlord macro sort of energy that's trying to get us into these negative spaces of materialism and whatnot, there's probably an aspect in me like that too. Like in all of us. Viruses are essentially how we've evolved. I mean, it is because of viruses that we are the human beings that we are today and have the resilience that we do. And we carry, I think 10%, I looked it up because I wanted to know more about this, but like 10% of our DNA is like altered by virus throughout time. And so it's like, this is sort of a different manifestation, but it's still kind of like us still, is that there's an aspect of us that is being realized on a macro level, but it's within all of us. So it would lead me to think, yeah, okay, maybe it's not like a group, or this sort of like I said, this sort of, Illuminati group of 100 people that run the world. It's just some aspect of us, and we have to figure out how to evolve past it so that we can energetically transition, shift, elevate our frequency, and enter a new earth.
I mean, you said it perfectly. I agree with you 1,000,000,000%. To claim that there's a boogeyman behind the door, that's and having fault with that boogeyman puts us in that state of perpetual cycle, right? You feel me on that?
Totally. Yeah, you're exactly. It's a victim mentality almost.
It is a victim mentality.
And that's powerlessness. You're giving your power to something else then.
Why do you think Hollywood is depicting these types of movies since the inception of movies and film and all that stuff, and the stories behind it? It's the boogeyman, it's this evil whatever, it's this or that. That creates this dualistic lens that we're constantly going to be held down by something, or we're going to constantly have to fight this something. And that's part of this like two-party system that we're dealing with in this country, the divide and conquer. It's all that same engineering, problem, reaction, solution. You create a problem, there's a reaction, you provide the solution to the problem you created. It's all psychosis. We got to snap out of this and step into our power and step into our true sovereignty. That's the only way. There's no other way.
Yes. Wow. Okay, dots are connecting. I feel like this makes a lot of sense. And I think we can go back for a second because, we had sort of talked about this offline a little bit with school and whatnot, but I love the saying that we are one generation away from a solution, right? Like if we just get the next generation to think differently, to act differently, to be different, we can really turn the ship. We can really autocorrect for the future. So I think schools, is something that comes to mind. And, we were kind of going off about this on our own, but I mean, I don't have kids, but I think I had come from an interesting perspective, given the fact that I left high school when I was 16. I got a GED. I never went to college, yet I am a successful, educated, intelligent person that has good, social skills, as well as like intellectual nature to being able to digest information. Anyway, and I didn't go to school. So I feel like while I don't have kids and I didn't really participate fully, it's because of it that I have this ability to talk about it a little bit. So, okay. So school, it seems like if there was a solution, it would be to go to that next generation. So what is it that school does wrong and what does it need to do right?
I love this conversation. And school, what an interesting term, and what an interesting connotation it creates when you hear the word school, right? The word magic behind it. You know, school has always represented in the last 60, 70, 80, 100 years higher learning. It's also represented a club, right? You're part of a club.
Okay.
It's actually a combination of the higher learning and the club that allows you to be appreciated in the real world, because the school is not the real world. It's just part of a process to get to the real world. And that we would actually put ourselves in debt to go through that process just to position us so the real world accepts us, right? So without the school, you're not being accepted by your peers and by your elders as someone that has the discipline or has the wherewithal or comes from the family to put him there. So there's a hierarchy there. There's a pedigree there. And look, I don't want to generalize too much. Are there outstanding schools and institutions out there that are providing incredible knowledge-based systems and higher learning systems and expanding consciousness and minds? Sure, but it's very far in between. And the School of Hard Knocks and the School of Life offer all of those with way more versatility and way more aspects and coding systems that activate your true potential, as opposed to just receiving information from a doctrine. That being said, our state-sponsored school systems right now in this country are an absolute abomination. It's an abyss of controlling and contracting a child. And that's why I'm a major advocate of Montessori and Waldorf schools and nature schools and homeschool systems that are built on the fabric of allowing a child to develop their own faculties, which is a major Steiner perspective. A child has to be building their own faculties on their own trust of their consciousness and their experiences at age 2, at age 3, at age 4, at age 5, 6, 7. And we now know through modern technology and modern psychology about epigenetics. And we also know the biology of belief. And we know that from third trimester in the womb to age 7, the child is in a theta brain zone, which that theta hertz signal is a specific hertz that is an imagination signal, an imagination impulse, and an electrical system for them to receive everything in their surroundings so they can learn how things are doing. It's that impulse of receivership. And that's why that age is so critical, that you have that child in an exploration phase. And you also have them in a phase where they're not being reprimanded by this difficult lens of right or wrong. You're allowing them to experience and learn nuances. You're incubating them. You're the parent. That's your perspective. You're holding the line, but you're not force indoctrinating that child into right or wrong. There's something that develops at age 3, 4, and 5 if you let a child be free. And it's the most important faculty of them all.
What's that?
Intuition.
Oh, yeah.
Intuition is the guiding light of this world.
Dude, it's the only foolproof lie detector system.
By far.
Like, tell me a time when your intuition has told you something about a job or a person or a relationship or some friend or something that has been wrong. Like, you can't, because it's true.
That's correct. It's all the senses in one. It's not just your sixth sense. And it's under my belief that intuition of humanity right now is so suppressed through these types of schooling. You put a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old in a chair at 8 a.m. under blue light, and you start them on a curriculum that's not exciting, that's not opening up their mind and hearts, that's not connecting them to spirit. You are suppressing everything in that child. And most people, and I could never stay in my classroom as a kid. I was known to not being able to stay in the chair.
Get up and move around.
I couldn't sit there. I had to climb a tree. I had to run around. I had to I was losing.
I think they go way too young. I mean, I just think kids go way too young. They're so exploratory. They want to climb a tree. They want to go like build a fort in the living room. They're so creative. You know, my sister's kids were over here building like with like, you know, the Jenga blocks was building like a farm with animals. And I'm like, great. You know, they just are so creative. When you go to school, they're like 1 + 1 = 2. Sit in this spot on the floor or you're in trouble. And if you have to go to the bathroom, you're just going to have to wait because it's not the bathroom break yet. And, you know, color in the lines and nope, ducks are not blue, ducks are yellow, you know, or whatever it is. It's like, it's just, there's no imagination, and essentially imagination and creativity are like really fundamental to our expansion.
That's it. We need to be artists first. The art and the creativity has to expand at that age. When you suppress it, you're suppressing all of the evolutionary codes of a child. And by the time they're 10, 11, 12, they're a shell of their evolutionary state. And that's why you have so many kids that are angry and frustrated and withdrawn, and you know, they become loners. They get addicted to things. They get addicted to terrible foods. They get addicted to drugs. They get addicted to alcohol. They get addicted to porn. It's not shocking.
They don't know who they are.
They have no idea. And then they have parents that have no idea who they are, and everyone's confused. And we're in that cycle right now. We're in generation lost, where it's 2023. I mean, this has been going on for quite some time. Now it's a habitual cycle. And you throw in all the other stressors of life, and then you throw in social media, and then you throw in all the filters, and I can go on and on. It's just crazy where we're at. If I create like a pie chart of showing all the little tiny nuances of all the things that children have to deal with, it's insanity levels, Danica, and it hurts me deeply. That's one of the things that it's hard for me to just like say this is the cosmic giggle. It's fundamentally hurting me. Throw in the foods that they're eating, throw in their, you know, the schedules that they're on. It's crazy. And so fundamentally, if we can get back to bringing incubation energies around children, getting them back into the earth, teaching them something like growing their own garden.
Yes.
Like, think about it. 100 years ago, about 95% of the population had a direct connection to the food that they ate. Either they grew it or their neighbor grew it. Okay. Today, it's a decimal fraction of 1%. Okay. Just think how big of a deal that is.
Yeah.
How huge that is. That means that we don't know where our food comes from, where our feet aren't in the earth. A child isn't given the opportunity to learn about what it takes to grow food and how much effort goes into that.
Oh my God, just growing a sweet potato. You'd be like, oh, wow, it takes that long? I value this.
I value this. That builds something called empathy. It's an empathetic lens to know how hard it was to grow something when you're about to take it in as your food source. That's a big deal. We need to go back to these things. This is pivotal to where we're trying to head as a society.
Yeah, well, and that was my next question, was just about what is the future? Like, you know, you have a magic wand and you can wave it and this is how we move forward. Or this is even just how you move forward. How do we get back on track? And is it enough if we just do it ourselves?
Starts with self. We can't worry about what's happening, you know, in the next county, in the next state, in the next whatever. It has to start internally. It has to shift internally. You know, look at your daily life. Look at the things that you guys are consuming your time. Like, create a chart and say, okay, this is how much time we're doing this, how much time we're doing this. Okay, well, where can we start modifying this? You know, where can we start creating through elimination, right? And it starts with small things here and there. Listening to the Danica Patrick show, like, okay, we're not going to watch this TV, or we're not going to get consumed in, gossip, right? Gossip's a big part of this whole thing too. It's like everyone cares about everyone's downfall. It's like, that's a parasitic energy. How are we going to start spending more quality time with our loved ones? How are we going to start, changing our lifestyle? Like, we're going to start getting up earlier. We're going to move away from the 2-3 glasses of wine a night. We're going to start looking at all the, the foods that we're eating. Who are we supporting and where our dollar goes? Are we connecting to, the farmers that are local? Like, do we go to farmers markets and get to know those people and support them? Because more influx of energy and more intention, then you have more energy that goes there and supports things that are going to create and inspire better health for people. There's little things that we can do that if everyone starts doing it, it makes a huge change. Are we surfing all day long on social media, just like losing our mind? Who are we following on social media?
Sure, the audit that.
Got to do an audit. Like, why are we attracted to this? What is it telling us about ourselves that, this is what we're into? And things that are internal stuff, it's all internal. And where are we casting judgment onto other people? Is it something that we hate within ourselves?
Of course, always. What we judge, we deny, If you could name a couple of things that you think have made the biggest difference in your life that you've done, what would they be?
Well, I changed course drastically on my network of people.
Yeah.
I've lost childhood friends and friends of 15 years because I just had to make the decision that my life mattered and that my time mattered. And when the circle got smaller, the vision got way larger. That's number one. And in doing such, it also put me in a position where I had to call myself higher, because it's always like, okay, eliminate those around you, but also look at yourself. How are you showing up for people? That was really important. Also my just my rituals, right? What were the non-negotiables that I needed to keep? And it's not living this like militaristic, regimented life, but it's knowing like at least 5-6 days a week, I'm in bed by 10 p.m. and I'm up at 5:30 a.m. and I'm doing my rituals. I have those in place because I understand that those are key to my body and brain functioning properly, so I can make the right decisions. Committing myself to my work and my journey and showing up for my, what I'm doing. Those are powerful things. And then just my meditation, being able to go into the higher realms, outside of the physical body and the self of being Chervin. Those are things, and getting out of my comfort zone.
Oof, that's a good one.
Jumping in my cold plunge, going into 160-degree saunas, jumping in the ocean, inverting, hanging upside down for 5 minutes, whatever it is, sprinting, crazy cliff diving, all the crazy stuff. Those are things that get you out of your comfort zone, but they're keeping me healthy and alive.
Yeah. I love that.
Like this,
Thank you. And thank you for just sharing your truth and encouraging all of us to do the same, and just ultimately stepping into our sovereignty so that, we can save this beautiful reality and planet that we live in instead of destructing it, which again, how we do anything is how we do everything. So if we're going about it in a destructive manner for ourselves, it's the same for the planet and vice versa.
Danica, I receive all that, and I appreciate you. You're just a reflection of me within you, and that's why I see myself in you. And it's an amazing time to be alive.
Yeah,
and it's an amazing time to be in our bodies and to be operating in our freedom and our discernment. And anyone listening to this, just know that you're the master magician of your reality, and it's never too late to take your life back. Grab the reins of your life, and just 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours a week, and everything can be different. That's real. And
so true. You're one decision away from an entirely different life.
Totally. Yeah. I'm excited for part 2. We'll get you out here to California.
Love it.
You on Wake the Fake Up. And
I love it. And I love that show.
Yeah. I really want to get to know your background, and you and I we're going to be racing a little bit too. So
Well, you have all the cars and I have the skills. So
That's right.
and we both love our black on black cars, which I respect.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
All right.
Which is another part of being human too. It's another thing is don't shame yourself in things that you love. We're in this earth playground. We just need to find balance.
Man, at the end of the day, a lot of times what everything gets sort of like deduced down to is it's just here to you're here for an experience.
Yeah.
You're just here to enjoy it. And, we're not here to be in fear. We're not here to be angry. We're just here to enjoy it. And can you imagine the world we'd live in if everyone was just in joy? Because when you hurt someone, you're not in joy, that's for sure. Right. And so, that's a beautiful world that you can imagine.
Yep. And we're in it right now.
But I won't feel bad when I beat you in a race.
Ladies first. Okay.
Oh, don't do that. Don't do that.
I knew that was going to get you going. All right. We'll compete. That's
all right. Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Me.
Yeah.
Big love to you and your audience.
Thanks everybody for listening to the Pretty Intense podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you heard today and you want to hear more, please click on the subscribe button.